What would you do if a single wrong decision could doom an entire camp of survivors? What if you had just seconds to decide who lives and who stays outside to face the horde? Quarantine zone, the last check, puts you in that exact position. And let me tell you, the pressure is absolutely real. This isn't your typical zombie shooter. This is something far more intense, far more psychological. Stick around, because what I'm about to show you in this first look will challenge everything you think you know about zombie survival games. The moment I booted up Quarantine Zone The Last Check, I knew I was in for something different. You're not a gun-toting hero mowing down zombies. You're not scavenging for supplies in abandoned buildings. Instead, you're the commander of a checkpoint, the last line of defense between the infected wasteland and a struggling camp of survivors. And honestly, that role hit me harder than I expected. The core gameplay revolves around screening survivors who come to your checkpoint seeking refuge. Sounds simple, right? Check them, let the healthy ones in, keep the infected out. But it's never that simple. These people are terrified, desperate, and sometimes the infection isn't immediately obvious. You have advanced screening tools at your disposal, scanners that can detect fever, abnormal heart rates, suspicious behaviors. But technology isn't perfect, and neither is your intuition. What really got to me was the weight of each decision. Every person you inspect has a story, even if it's not explicitly told. You can see it in their eyes, in how they respond to your questions. Some are calm, cooperative. Others are panicked, aggressive. And you have to decide in seconds whether that panic is just fear or if they're hiding something. One infected person slipping through your checkpoint, and it's game over for everyone inside. The screening process itself is surprisingly detailed. You're not just clicking yes or no. You use thermal scanners to check body temperature. You examine their belongings for contraband or illegal items. Sometimes you find rare collectibles that can be traded or used. You look for bite marks, unusual symptoms, behavioral red flags. If someone seems suspicious but not definitively infected, you can send them to quarantine for observation or to the lab for further testing. The healthy ones go to the residential block where they can live safely. And the infected? Well, there's nothing you can do for them anymore. But here's where the game really twists the knife. Sometimes you'll send someone to quarantine just to be safe, and they'll turn into a zombie right there in isolation. And suddenly you're faced with another choice. Do you dispose of them immediately, or do you keep them contained for research? Because those infected specimens are valuable. You can extract samples from them, gain experience points for your staff, unlock permanent upgrades. It's a horrifying utilitarian calculus. Do you save every life you can, or do you sacrifice some for the greater good of scientific advancement? The game doesn't shy away from these moral dilemmas. In fact, it leans into them hard. There are individuals with unknown symptoms who could be analyzed, but those tests are always fatal to the subject. So you're literally choosing between saving a potentially healthy person or gaining crucial knowledge that could help everyone else. I found myself staring at the screen more than once, genuinely wrestling with these decisions. And that's not something most games make me do. Beyond the checkpoint, you're also managing the entire camp. As more survivors come in, your responsibilities grow exponentially. You need to ensure there's enough electricity, food, and medicine for everyone. Resources are always limited, and you're constantly making tough calls about distribution. Do you give extra rations to the workers who keep the camp running? Or do you distribute equally and risk lowering morale and efficiency? Do you invest in better medical facilities or stronger defenses? Speaking of defenses, when the alarm sounds and the infected breach the perimeter, you take direct control of combat drones. This is where the game shifts gears from tense management sim to frantic defensive action. You're commanding automated weaponry, trying to thin out the horde before they reach your walls. It's chaotic, it's stressful, and it's a stark reminder that no matter how careful you are at the checkpoint, the threat is always just outside, waiting. The better you manage your expanding base, the more resources, tools, and weapon upgrades you unlock. There's a genuine sense of progression here. You start with basic equipment and limited space, and gradually you're building a more sophisticated operation. New screening technologies, better quarantine facilities, more effective defenses. Every upgrade feels earned, and every setback feels devastating. Graphically, Quarantine Zone has this gritty industrial aesthetic that perfectly captures the atmosphere of a world falling apart. The checkpoint itself is all harsh lighting, cold metal, and sterile surfaces. The survivors look genuinely distressed, their animations and expressions conveying fear and desperation. When someone turns, it's not pretty. The transformation is brutal and visceral. The game doesn't glamorize the horror, it presents it raw and uncomfortable. The UI is functional and clear, which is crucial for a game where you're processing information quickly. Scanner readouts, inventory screens, resource management panels, everything is laid out in a way that makes sense. You're never fumbling through menus when you need to make a split-second decision. The visual feedback is excellent too. You can see the progression of infection in quarantined subjects, watch the camp grow and change as you build new structures. Now, to answer the question I know many of you are wondering, is this a co-op game? Unfortunately, no. Quarantine Zone: The Last Check is strictly single player. And honestly, I think that's the right call for this particular experience. The tension, the moral weight, the pressure of command, these are things that work best when it's just you making the calls. Adding multiplayer would dilute that focused, claustrophobic feeling of responsibility. This is your checkpoint, your survivors, your decisions, and you live or die by them alone. The audio design deserves special mention. The ambient sounds of the checkpoint are oppressive. The hum of machinery, the distant groans of the infected, the nervous chatter of survivors in the waiting area. When someone turns in quarantine, the sounds are genuinely unsettling. And when the hordes attack, the audio becomes this overwhelming cacophony that perfectly mirrors the chaos on screen. The music is minimal, mostly atmospheric tension, which works perfectly. It never tells you how to feel, it just amplifies the stress you're already experiencing. One aspect I really appreciated is how the game teaches you through experience rather than hand-holding. Early on, you might let through someone who seemed fine, only to have them turn hours later. That failure becomes a learning moment. You start noticing patterns, developing your own screening strategies. Maybe you become more paranoid, sending more people to quarantine just to be safe. Or maybe you become more efficient, trusting your instincts and the technology equally. The game respects your intelligence and lets you develop your own approach. The difficulty curve is well balanced. The first few days are manageable as you learn the systems, but as time progresses, the situation deteriorates. More infected, fewer resources, more desperate survivors with increasingly complex symptoms. The game keeps ramping up the pressure without ever feeling unfair. You always feel like you could have done better, made smarter choices, been more prepared. And that drives you to try again. There's also this underlying narrative that unfolds through reports, radio chatter, and the state of survivors who arrive at your checkpoint. You piece together what's happening in the wider world, how the outbreak spread, which areas fell first. It's environmental storytelling done right. You're not sitting through cutscenes, you're actively experiencing the collapse through your role at this critical checkpoint. What strikes me most about Quarantine Zone is how it makes you feel the apocalypse through bureaucracy and management rather than through action. The horror isn't in fighting zombies hand-to-hand. It's in the impossible choices, the resource scarcity, the knowledge that you can't save everyone. It's in watching someone you cleared as healthy die later because you didn't have enough medicine to treat their other injuries. It's in the faces of people you turn away, knowing they probably won't survive out there. The replayability is solid too. Different approaches yield different results. A more aggressive, research-focused playthrough, where you sacrifice infected for data, plays very differently from a more humanitarian run, where you prioritize saving every possible life. The random elements in survivor arrivals and infection rates mean no two games play out exactly the same. Performance-wise, the game runs smoothly. I didn't encounter any major bugs or technical issues in my time with it. Load times are reasonable, the frame rate is stable even during hectic drone defense sequences. It's clear the developers focused on making a solid, polished experience rather than just throwing in features. If I had any criticisms, it would be that the game can feel a bit repetitive once you've mastered the systems. The loop of screening, managing, defending becomes familiar after several hours. But the developers seem to understand this and keep introducing new variables, new challenges, new dilemmas to keep things fresh. And honestly, the core gameplay is strong enough that even when it's familiar, it's still engaging. This isn't a game for everyone. If you're looking for fast-paced zombie action, this isn't it. If you want a power fantasy where you're an unstoppable survivor, look elsewhere. But if you're interested in a more cerebral, morally complex take on the zombie apocalypse, if you want to feel the weight of command and the burden of impossible decisions, then Quarantine Zone: The Last Check is absolutely worth your time. Quarantine Zone: The Last Check reminded me that the most terrifying aspect of any apocalypse isn't the monsters, it's the choices we're forced to make when everything falls apart. It's a game that will test your judgment, your priorities, and maybe even your ethics. If that sounds like your kind of challenge, definitely give this one a look. Let me know in the comments what you think, and whether you'd prioritize saving lives or advancing research if you were in command. Thanks for watching this first look, and I'll catch you in the next one.